Welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Why do we keep getting moments like this? I mean, it's one after another, at least once every 2 weeks minimum, where a Democrat is left completely silent, like a fumbling, bumbling fool, unable to answer very, very basic questions. Well, folks, the reason it constantly happens is because these people are incredible liars. They are not to be trusted. And when you catch them on the BS, and it always seems to be the same culprits, this time once again Jaime Raskins, well, they either go absolutely silent and look like complete fools, or they immediately try to change subject, move on to the next question, or walk away from the interview. You literally named your bill the Inflation Reduction Act because supposedly this inflation bill is supposed to do something to curb inflation, but every single Democrat that's currently been asked, well, how exactly does this bill tackle inflation? Not a single one of them can give a single example or a single provision within the bill that does anything to curb inflation. In other words, Democrats lied to you. They're playing the same BS marketing game that they do with every single bill. Republicans voted against the Inflation Reduction Act. Oh, well, Republicans don't care about your cost of living and don't want to do anything to attack inflation. You see that? They just use inflation as a political talking point and attack point. But obviously this bill is nothing but a misdirection. It's a scam meant to convince people that they're doing something, but it's not exactly working because not a single Democrat can lay out a simple argument or a simple statement as to how this bill tackles inflation. Take a look at this absolute disgrace, folks. We got to tackle this Democrat dishonesty, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so just the other day we covered Pramila Jayapal claiming that the Inflation Reduction Act definitely tackles inflation, but actually, inflation is just a theoretical term, theoretical concept that fancy economists use. Not exactly sure what that means. And today, when Democrat Jaime Raskins was questioned on the Hill, well, his response was extremely telling, I'll tell you that much. Take a look at this.
As soon as the act goes into effect, I hope that all of the provisions will begin to work. I know that those who've been blaming President Biden for the inflation going up are now giving President Biden all the credit for inflation going down. So we're moving things in the right direction already.
And what parts of the bill do you think will quickly work on that specifically?
Next question.
What parts of the bill do you think will put to work on lowering inflation specifically? Jaime Raskins immediately looks away and says, next question, please. Well, doesn't that inspire confidence in Democrat legislation? Of course not. It continues to prove what we've always known, that they name bills something fancy related to some goal that's relevant to whatever's going on. But of course, the bill always seems to have a different focus or unintended consequences. During the pandemic, Democrats put you out of business, and then they claim that they care so deeply about you, and they were going to pass billions, trillions of dollars to subsidize your life, to help you get through these hard times that they definitely didn't put you through. No, of course not. They would never do that. But instead of helping you, what did they really do? They absolutely decimated the economy, created long-lasting economic hurt. They made you poorer, hurt your standard of living, hurt basic affordability, and now they're taking it on. They're tackling the problem that they created with this inflation reduction scam that does absolutely nothing about inflation and is actually just a massive climate/healthcare bill that supposedly makes your life cheaper and makes health insurance cheaper, prescription drugs like insulin cheaper, but even that is highly questionable to say the least. I also seem to remember Donald Trump reducing the price of insulin without having to print billions upon billions of dollars. I also seem to remember Joe Biden taking office and undoing what Donald Trump did to tackle insulin prices. And so it seems like Joe Biden raised the price and is now spending billions of taxpayer dollars, your money, to reduce the price that he increased, while claiming the whole thing is inflation reduction. These people are such incredible liars, it's not even funny. And don't take my word for it. Even Democrat voters themselves know that this whole thing is BS. The whole thing's a scam, the whole thing's a sham. The big lie failed. Just 12% of Americans think the Inflation Reduction Act will actually reduce inflation. The Democrats named their tax and spending bill the Inflation Reduction Act, but Americans are not buying it. No way. I mean, that seems absolutely unbelievable. The Americans aren't buying it, but the arguments are just so coherent as to why this bill tackles inflation.
And what parts of the bill do you think will quickly work on that specifically?
Next question.
I mean, how could you possibly be a skeptic? The facts seem undeniable, the argument so incredibly logically sound and bulletproof. Of course, you can sense the sarcasm in my voice. These people are so utterly dishonest that even left-wing mainstream media hacks are calling them, quote, Orwellian for the whole process. Take a look at this moment involving Karine Jean-Pierre and ABC News' Jonathan Karl.
But let me ask you, it's called the Inflation Reduction Act. But the Congressional Budget Office, which is nonpartisan, said that there would be a negligible impact on inflation this year and barely impact inflation at all next year. I mean, isn't it almost Orwellian? How can you call it Inflation Reduction Act when the nonpartisan experts say it's not going to?
So I appreciate that. I appreciate the question. We've actually addressed this, the CBO. It was the top line number. There's more in there that shows that it will have the money remember how we're doing this too. It's making sure that billionaires in corporate America are paying their fair share, making sure that that the tax code is a little bit more fair. And so when you do that, when you put it in its totality, you will see that it will bring down, lower the deficit, which will help fight inflation.
So you're disagreeing with the assessment of
there's
CBO.
more to it. It's just it was the way that Republicans did that was so that it could make an argument that is false. It is going to fight inflation. It has been proven. It has been said by economists across the board on the Republican side and the Democrat side.
Oh, she appreciates the question, and they've actually addressed this. When? I followed every single element of Democrat response, and it's all been totally incoherent, totally dishonest. There's not a single Democrat who can go on the record with a legitimate, fact-based argument as to how this bill tackles inflation. Not a single one. That's because very simply it doesn't. Increasing the baseline tax margin on corporations doesn't reduce inflation. That doesn't tackle inflation. That reduces the bottom line for corporations, which leads to either two things: layoffs, reduction in salary, or increase in prices, or all three. The Inflation Reduction Act inflates inflation. Every single element of Democrat rhetoric and Democrat messaging related to this bill is completely dishonest. I mean, even earlier with what Jaime Raskin said, that the majority of Americans give Joe Biden credit for reducing inflation. He says after one single month of a reduction of 0.6%, mostly due to demand destruction and a slight tick down in energy prices. I mean, the premise that inflation is down in general is complete hogwash. It's like I mentioned in the previous video, inflation is actually transitory, but not in the same way that the Biden administration said all of those months ago in their Orwellian response to the initial inflation surge. But it's transitory in the sense that it's transitioning from energy costs to goods and services. Food prices up 13.1% year over year in the July report. That's not a reduction in inflation, that's continued inflation. You don't get to take credit when CPI is currently at 8.5%. And the sheer irresponsibility of passing this bill at this current time is probably the greatest offense. You know, if you look at the historical trends, the actual negative impact of a recession or hyperinflation doesn't materialize overnight. We're in the midst of a recession and an economic slowdown, which is slowly trickling in. I mean, the New York Fed's manufacturing survey shows the second worst crash ever, and the US is now plunging into a housing recession in August, home builders say. A lot of the economic indicators that we're following here are lagging indicators, meaning we possibly haven't seen the worst yet, and the Biden administration decides that the perfect time to pass a corporate tax hike, increase government spending, and print more money is in the middle of an economic downturn, in the middle of a recession. I mean, for Pete's sakes, even Obama said that you probably shouldn't increase taxes in the middle of a recession.
The last thing you want to do is to raise taxes in the middle of a recession because that would just take more demand out of the economy and put businesses in a further hole.
The whole thing is economically illiterate, just like the Democrats. In fact, here's a perfect example to show the Democrats have no idea what they're doing. Biden's inflation bill creates subsidies for electric vehicles, making access to electric vehicles more affordable for the average American. Biden's inflation bill made a $7,500 electric vehicle tax credit, and now Ford and GM just raised their prices by the same amount. Government is not going to solve your problems. Government subsidies are not going to solve your problems. They're not going to make things more affordable. They're going to spend your money like a bunch of dummies and make your life worse. How do I know that? Well, I mean, just look at history. Their track record speaks for itself. Nothing else needs to be said. And if you think that this inflation reduction scam is going to be any different, well then I guess you're part of the vote blue no matter who crowd, and you've been voting for Democrats for expecting them to make your life better. And here we are, probably 40 years later, you're still voting for Democrats because your life still sucks. They're not going to solve your problems. The only person who can do that is you. But that's what I got for you guys on this one. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel if you feel like joining the community. We'd be glad to have you. I'm going to get back to work. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.